Okay, what up, babes? So today I've got a real treat for you. I've got one of my besties here, Aimee Esther, who is a fellow YouTuber, and she used to be a high school math and health teacher.
I did.
So today we are talking about the 10 things that your high school teacher wishes that you knew. And I'm so excited to
I'm
hear
excited
it.
too.
Hey, so Aimee, I know that you've prepared like 10 things.
Yes.
Like, are these 10 things that your students would do that would drive you nuts, or just like 10 tips?
I would say a little bit of both. 10 things that are tips to help you have a better relationship with your teacher, and some of them are things that maybe were just a little obnoxious as a teacher that I'd like you to know. And just so you guys know, I'm not speaking for every teacher out there, of course. So if I say we or talking teachers in general, just know that there definitely could be teachers who think differently than I do. But from the teachers that I've talked to, I feel like a lot of them feel the same way that I do.
Right. I mean, you like obviously had relationships with your fellow teachers, and then you were teaching high school like math and health. I feel like those are two really hard subjects to teach,
Yes.
and people either like love them or they hate them.
Most of them hated them.
Oh, no.
But it's good. It's good. I just love teaching, and I think that a lot of teachers love teaching. So the first thing that I want to share with you guys today is that respect goes both ways. I think a lot of the times when I was a high school student, I would think, oh, this teacher doesn't respect me, this teacher doesn't like me, or I would think things like that. But the thing is, now that I've been a teacher, I've noticed that it goes both ways. Like, when a student didn't respect me, it's harder for me to respect them and to give them like all the attention that they need if I didn't feel like they weren't respecting me. So
that's huge.
just know that it goes both ways. If you want us to respect you, make sure you're also respecting us as your teacher as well.
That is so interesting, because in one of my most popular videos today is like how to get teachers to like you. And something I teach in there is respect, because my mom was a teacher for 30 years, and what I never thought about though was like your teachers having respect for you. I mean, every teacher I've had has been super nice, super professional, but they're real people, and we have different respect levels for people who are nice to us and people who are jerks to us. So I'm glad that's number one.
Very
like,
true.
get respect in order.
Yeah, respect is definitely number one. Okay, perfect segue into the second one I want to talk about, which is we are human. We have good days and bad days. Sometimes we also are waiting for Friday. Sometimes also we just want to get through that class. We're human beings, and we have lives outside of school as well. And I think a lot of, at least when I was in, especially junior high and high school, I just thought like my teachers lived at the school and that's all they did. But they have families, and they have lives outside of school as well. And we're human beings, and sometimes we make mistakes, and sometimes we might have a bad day and we might say something we regret, or we might have a really good day and be a little more lenient one day. So just know that we are human beings. We're not these teacher robots that I think
everybody thinks that you are.
Yeah. And that we just, the only thing we ever do is school. And you guys are our priority while we're at school, but there's still other things going on in our lives as well.
So with that, would you say that like it went a really long way, like when a student was like forgiving, even that's like a strong word, but just like aware of your needs, or like just like saw you as a human being? Like, what was like the difference in that?
Yeah, so I actually had an experience so the reason that I stopped teaching was actually because I got really sick. And that's what actually my whole YouTube channel is about.
It's pretty amazing. Chronic illness,
yeah,
like anything.
Chronic illness.
That's Aimee.
But I got really, really sick, and so I told my students, I'm actually not going to be able to teach you guys anymore. I've been really sick, I'm leaving. And I had students come to me crying, saying they were so sorry for the way they treated me, so sorry for just being disrespectful in general. And I feel like because of that experience, those students saw me as human, that like I did have life outside of school, and I am a human being, and I have weaknesses and I have strengths, and some of the things that they maybe saw as my weaknesses or things that they thought I wasn't doing well turned out to be things that my help was causing.
Yeah.
And so I actually had a lot of students reach out to me and really like come to me crying because they felt bad the way that they had treated me. But seeing that, it was like I saw them as humans as well, right? Like,
yeah, totally.
sometimes because you're a teacher, you have so many students, it can be hard to like to pick
have
out.
individual relationships and know every single person.
Yes.
And I think that's amazing, and I think it's sad that as human beings, it takes somebody else showing a weakness, showing a vulnerability for us to take a step back and be like, oh, I can be kind because Aimee's sick, right? Or I can, be nicer to my teacher because I had no idea that you're fighting off like migraines and your stomach hurting and like feeling awful all the time. I challenge you to not wait for your teacher to share their vulnerability or for them to have to break down crying and be like, I'm going through this awful thing, for you to be nice to them. I remember I had a teacher in high school who like broke down crying, and we were all like, oh, she's so weird. Well, we find out later like she's going through a divorce or she's like going through all these awful things. And so assume that your teacher is a human being with real life problems that are far beyond just teaching you at school.
Okay, so are we on number 3?
Yep.
Number
Third
3 is that we have a lot of students and we work a lot of hours, more than we are even contracted to work. Almost every teacher that I knew would stay very late every single day. They would come really early, and they were trying to take care of all of these students because we don't just have you as a student. We don't just have your class as a student, especially as high school teachers. I had 8 classes of 20 to 30 students that I was responsible for their math and health grade, and we don't get paid a lot for the hours that we work. And I feel like that's pretty common knowledge. Like, a lot of people know that teachers are pretty underpaid, but most teachers are just working so hard for you, and we have so many students to take care of. They're working from the time they wake up until they leave that school, and sometimes they even, I think your mom probably was like this, take schoolwork home, or like finishing assignments at home, or finishing
like grading.
Or
like, yeah, no, totally.
Finishing grading assignments at home, and they're just working all the time. Like, we do have lives outside of school, and we have families and all of that, but we also spend a lot of time working to create the curriculum for you guys.
So with that, I have a question for you. Did it bother you when like students wanted like extra time out of class then, or like extra attention, or a classic statement is like, what did I miss at school? Like, will you catch me up? Like, how did you respond to that, knowing that you've got 100 students?
So I actually loved when students came to me and asked for extra help. And I'm currently still tutoring. I tutor math in the evenings during the school year. And so I have a lot of chance for one-on-one interactions right now. And when I was a teacher, I had been tutoring up until that point. And so I was very comfortable with doing one-on-one help with students. And I personally loved it. And I don't know if all teachers are like this, but it was just, nothing made me happier than when a student who was failing or was doing poorly in my class would come to me and get extra help and come to me after school.
That is awesome.
Even if I had a bunch to do, I would much rather like put everything off to help that student. That's the way that I was.
That's awesome.
Because seeing that growth in a student is so much more beneficial to me than working on, the next day's curriculum.
Okay. So if you are struggling, talk to your teachers. It sounds like one-on-one time is what they live for, and they appreciate your effort.
Okay, tip number 4 is that we need effort. Going right along with what we were just talking about, is that we need you guys to show us effort. I had so many students who were failing, were doing poorly in my class, usually because they didn't turn in their assignments. And I would tell them, hey, come see me after school, come see me during flex period, come see me during lunch, and we will work on this together. But I need your effort. And something that I was actually talking to my husband about is my husband struggled a little bit in school, and he was saying how, you know, he struggled to go into some of his classes because of things like anxiety or maybe embarrassment because his friends weren't staying after school. He wanted to be cool and like hang out with his friends after
I get
school.
that. Okay.
Didn't want to like be the weird kid who had to go home late or miss the
Getting
bus.
extra help.
Yeah. And the thing is, I was totally willing to help any student with whatever would help them the most. Like, some students coming after school is not the best thing. So I had students who had like a lot of anxiety would come before school because I found that there was no kids there, no like kids waiting for them or noticing that they were going in early, because most kids come right at the time the first bell rings.
That's so true.
And so if you have social anxiety, that's a really good time to go. Maybe you have troubles with bus rides, like you don't have a ride home, then lunch is a good time. I had students bring their lunch into my classroom, and they would eat lunch while we would talk about their assignments.
That's so awesome.
Some schools have like a flex period where you can just go get help with whatever class. So if your school offers that, definitely go to whatever class you're struggling in the most, which from my experience as a math teacher is usually math.
That's Aimee.
Yeah. So I had a lot of kids in my flex class, but a lot of them were still kind of too shy to come up and ask me personal questions. They would rather just work on their own. And if you are struggling with something like that, just know that you can talk to your teacher about that. Tell them what you're struggling. Say, you know, it's really hard for me with the social anxiety I experience, or with so-and-so's comments that he makes to me. It's hard for me to come up and get one-on-one help. It's embarrassing to me. We'll find a way to make it work for you.
That's awesome.
And maybe you go to a different teacher for help. I've had kids who they just did better with a different teacher for that one-on-one help. So they would go to them, and then their friends that were in their class didn't even notice that. So
that's a
just
great idea.
be honest. Tell your teacher the truth.
No, I love that, because it's real. Like, if we can pretend that, like, oh, it's so easy to go get tutoring help, it's so easy to go in and talk to your teacher, it's not. Like, we'll be really real on that. But I think what Aimee is telling you is just gold in, like, find a time that works for you. And honestly, do not be embarrassed, and find a time that your friends aren't waiting for you. I used to ride with my brothers to school, and so like me staying after school wouldn't work either, right? And also like being at school one more hour or even half an hour to me was like a nightmare. So I worked during my lunches, and you were reminding me that I really liked academics, so I didn't struggle there, but during high school is when my eyesight started to change. And so I needed glasses, but I was so embarrassed at the thought of having glasses that I wouldn't go in and actually get my eyes checked or tell my parents that I was having a hard time seeing the board. So I remember it took all of my courage to tell my teachers, like, hey, can I sit at the front of the room, and like, please do not call on me to read from the board. It literally, like, I almost cried because I was afraid, you know. And I don't know what it is. All my teachers were delightful human beings, and yet I was terrified to tell them that I needed glasses and I needed to sit at the front of the room. So,
but we would much rather, as your teacher, have you come to us and tell us that and put you at the front of the room.
Totally.
And know that you're more comfortable there, right? Like, that's what we want. But I do, like, I understand that sometimes the anxiety of it is just, it's hard. But
so worth it, though.
Yeah, it is
so worth the effort.
Just moving right along to are we on 5?
Yeah.
I'm a bad counter. I'm a math teacher and I can't count. I just can't think that far behind. Okay, so number 5 is be honest with us. Just like we were talking about in the last tip, is we just want you to be honest. If it's honesty about, you know, your anxiety or not being able to see the board or things like that, but also honesty with your work. We would rather have you turn in 2 problems done than have a completely copied paper from your friend, because we want you to learn. We genuinely want you to learn, and you will learn more by doing 2 problems than you will by copying your friend's assignment. So in all things, when it comes to talking with your teacher about things, telling them why you were late for school, like, I would much rather have a kid come to me and say, you know, I woke up late and I was really slow getting out the door. I don't really have a good excuse, but I'm late today. That's someone making something up and telling me something that's not true.
Because you can see right through it. Like
I can tell.
we act like we're like, oh, I got the wool over my teacher's eyes. No.
Yeah, and I can tell. Like, and I mean, there were times where I would see students on their phones and they would say, no, I'm not on my phone, Mrs. Call. And I could tell. I knew you were on
like,
your phone.
I see your phone.
Oops.
There goes your, there goes your. Well, could I ask you this? Like, I think from my experience of going through high school and my experience having a mom as a teacher, like, cheating is the number one thing that, like, bothers your teachers, but also, like, will just sever that relationship.
Yeah, it does. It loses that trust. Like we were talking about with tip number one, is that respect. That respect is gone when we find out that you're cheating. And you might get away with it sometimes, but I'm telling you, there are so many times where my students thought they were being so sneaky and so clever, and they didn't get away with it. And I've had other students that turned in literally a completely blank test and wrote on the top, Mrs. Call, I have no idea how to do this. And
No
I
way.
respected them so much more. To the point where I would say, okay, let's redo your test. Let's work together.
That's so cool.
Let's learn how to do this material, and then let's take the test again. Rather than someone who I know has cheated, I'm not going to let them retake their test. Number six. Number 6 is that we have rules and certain systems for a reason. And I know it can be kind of annoying. I remember as a high school student being annoyed at like every teacher had their own system, they did their own thing.
It's
and
real.
it's hard. It's hard to, especially when you're starting out, like that those first few weeks in a new semester or a new year, where you're trying to figure out what every teacher does and doesn't do. It can be hard, but there's a reason that we have certain systems. For example, I had a rule of no extra credit, and so I'd have students come to me and be really upset with me that I didn't do extra credit. But the reason that I did that is because I would prefer that they did the original material. So instead of doing extra credit, I allowed my students to redo their assignments as many times as they needed to do to get their grade up. But my students would rather come do a crossword puzzle and get those extra points.
Yeah, who wouldn't? I mean,
sorry, start coughing.
no,
Oh my gosh,
I'm dying about extra credit because it's so true. Like you think extra credit's gonna be easier, and so yeah, no, I had a lot.
But it doesn't teach you as much, and so for that reason, I didn't allow extra credit, and I had students that were like so annoyed because so and so, like this other teacher does extra credit, so you should do extra credit. But I mean, at least for me and most of the teachers I talk to, we have a reason for those types of rules or those systems that we use. And especially teachers that have been doing it for years and years, they have learned what works and what doesn't. They have learned what they like, what they don't like, what works for them. And so I know it's annoying to not have like every teacher doing the exact same system,
yeah.
but usually there's always a reason for it.
No, that's awesome. Like that insight took me right back to high school where some teachers you had to have the hall monitor pass. Some teachers would let you go. Some teachers no extra credit. I remember that some teachers like the grading system was different. Like your tests didn't matter. Your tests only were the only thing that mattered.
Right.
I mean, I think it's so valuable to take the time to figure out your teacher's system and don't try to impose somebody else's or your likes on a teacher and saying like, Mrs. Call, you should do extra credit. It's a waste of your time. They're not going to change their rules and their whole system because one student out of 200 decided that extra credit was a good idea.
Moving right along to number 7 is that we teach to the majority. So just kind of going along with what we were just talking about of not putting, the way you like to do things on your teacher, is that we teach to the majority of the students, which means that there's a lot of students who maybe learn differently than the majority. There's some that learn better from reading, right? Everyone has kind of their own way of learning, and it's hard as a high school teacher to teach in a way that works for every student. In fact, it's impossible. And so we teach to the majority. So that means that sometimes you're going to go to a class and maybe last year you had a math teacher that taught exactly the way that you learn. You were able to learn from that teacher really well, and then the next year you feel like you're really lost, and it's because that teacher probably just teaches differently from what they have seen as the majority. might be different than another teacher. And so what I would do if I were you and you feel like you are not learning in the same way that your teacher is teaching, is to go to them one-on-one and see what help you can get, kind of like we were talking about before. So it might be switching teachers. Like, I had students that loved me as a person. They wanted to be in my class. I also had students who did not like me, but that's okay. But even students that liked me, who I just didn't teach in the way that helped them the most. And so they would go to a different teacher and they would learn better in that class. And so it could be changing teachers. It could just be talking to your teacher. Maybe you just need more group work. And so talking to your teacher, maybe seeing if your teacher can implement some of those ideas. Not saying that they will or that it will work for the whole class, but just being honest with them, talking to them about it, and seeing what your options are to help you understand the material better.
And I think that what is so important about this that you can start to do, like today in your high school experience, is to start to think like the majority. And not that you change your learning style, but that you think, oh, my teacher, her job is not to make sure that Abby Winslow does well in her class. Her job is to make sure that the whole class does well. So how can I be part of that? How can I be somebody that makes my teacher's life easier? Because it's kids that go up to their teacher and they're like, I need, all these things. I need the extra credit. I need you to bend the rules for me. That's really hard for them to do because they're taking care of the whole class and not just you. Now, you can go and get that one-on-one help and make sure that if you need that tutoring, they are available for you. But don't be afraid if you don't share your teacher's learning style. It can be really hard to change teachers just because you, if you're a softie like me, you're worried you're gonna hurt their feelings. You just have a conversation about that.
And it doesn't hurt our feelings, by the way. It happens all the time. It's totally normal.
That's good to know.
Never has hurt my feelings. Even kids that they told me they did not like me, they didn't want to be in my class, it didn't hurt my feelings because I know that I'm not the teacher for everyone.
And I think
most teachers are used to that.
Yeah, and that can empower you to be able to say either I like this teacher, I don't, but I gotta take care of me. When I think back on my high school experience, there were a couple classes that I got into, and on week one, you're just like, man, this isn't maybe the right group of students for me. I've switched classes, kept the teacher, switched classes to a different period just to get away from the group of students that I was in. Maybe you think to yourself, actually, this isn't the class that I thought I was signing up for. I mean, do not be afraid to take your education into your own hands, talk to a counselor, talk to your parents, and see what you can do to make your classes the best they can be.
Yeah, and bring your parents in, and your counselor, like you were saying, if you were, not wanting to talk to your teacher about it, like you were saying, not wanting to, make them feel bad, talk to your parents, because first of all, your parents haven't had that one-on-one relationship with your teacher like you have, so they don't.
They're like a third party.
They connection, right? And so it's easier for them to come in and say, this isn't working for me. I've had parents email me or come into me personally and tell me it wasn't working, or maybe you just go to the counselor or something like that. But having kind of a middleman if you are worried about talking to your teacher about that is something that can really help. Number 8 is that we have been your age before, and we understand that sometimes school's not your first priority. We understand that sometimes math isn't your first priority in your life, that sometimes your boyfriend or girlfriend is more important to you, and sometimes your sports are more important to you. And we have experienced so many students who have taken or showed us different paths that they like more than the schoolwork that they're doing. And it's normal for us. It's normal for you guys to not want to put schoolwork first sometimes, and teachers know that. And just know that we have been there. Even though I know some teachers, especially the ones that have been there forever, that, they're getting close to retiring, that you might think, oh, they have no idea. Times were so different when they were here. But they're really not. They've been there.
Yeah.
We've all been high school students. We've been in that place of feeling insecure, of, maybe not wanting to work on our schoolwork that day. We've all been there. And sometimes I do think teachers forget because they are in, teacher mode.
They're a different side of it. Yeah.
But if you especially talk to them about what you're going through, we are human, you guys are human as well. And getting on that level and saying like, hey, I'm struggling at home, like my family life is not
Crazy,
going well
yeah.
right now. Yeah, like talking to them about that and kind of bringing yourself back down to human level instead of just being, you know, one of the many students in a sea of students can help your teacher to maybe accommodate to you differently. But just knowing that your teacher has been there before at some point. And of course they haven't been in your exact situation, but if you are honest with them and you're telling them how what you're really going through, what you're really struggling with, they can help you a lot better.
That's awesome. And I think the secret to getting teachers on your side and like talking, like coming down to that human level is, one, you're like humble about it. You're not saying like, I'm the football star and so I need you to excuse me from this math test. Like that's not gonna go really far. But if you can come in there, if you can be humble, and if you can like not ask for like being the exception to the rule. Like don't expect to be the exception to the rule, but come in and be like, listen, I am trying so hard to get this football scholarship. I've got a big game on the same day that your test is due. Can I take it the day before? Can I, like, when you can show some gumption and go into a teacher and be like, I thought this through. I'm not asking you to make me an exception to the rule. I just want to talk to you on a human level. Like, how can I solve this problem with your help?
Yes, I love that. Okay, number 9 is something that I think most teachers also would agree with, but this is definitely something that I believe, is that learning how to learn is more important than getting a good grade.
Oh,
So
wow.
I had students who were completely failing my class that, you know, worked with a tutor outside of class or worked with me one-on-one, or kids that I have tutored who have come up to a D, but they learned how to learn. And they're getting better and they're taking those little steps to learn more, and it's not always about the grade. I think it's hard, especially if you are in sports or you're in some kind of extracurricular activity that requires a certain grade.
Oh, and time.
It's hard to not just want the grade over anything, but we as teachers, we truly want to teach you. We want you to learn the material, but more than that, we want you to learn how to learn. Because I think especially in high school, a lot of students would come to me and say, I'm never going to use this in my life, Mrs. Call. Why in the world would you ever
We always
teach
say that
me
with
this?"
math.
Yes, they always say, I'll never use this. Now, first of all, I will probably
use
say
math
that
every
you will
day.
use it. But even more important than that is learning how to learn. Even if you don't use the math that you are learning in high school ever, or the English or whatever class you're in, learning how to learn is a huge life skill that will change your life. And that's what I would focus on if I were you, more than getting the grade. You know, you don't want to fail, I'm sure, but if you can learn how to learn, you'll be much better off in life.
No, that's awesome. And what that like made me think of is, so like academics was really easy for me. I learned how to learn and what systems worked for me. Like the school system just kind of worked for me. So my parents expected me to get like a 3.5 or better, and I expected that of myself. But I remember like my brother's grades, they like would celebrate all of his like poor grades in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, what the heck, Mom and Dad? Like, why are you cool with his C when, you know, I got like a Abby, are you doing okay with a B minus? And it's because they knew like where they were starting from, and they knew like that to him, that is an A, you know? Where like we all have these different standards of learning, and if you can't like appreciate just putting in the effort and trying your best, sometimes your best is a C.
Yeah.
Sometimes your best is an A. It all just depends.
And
So-
sometimes your best is barely passing the class. Or it could be failing and using that failure to maybe do summer school or redo that class and learning so much more because you had gone through that failure and you're learning more. Because I feel like failure, whether it's you think failure is a B or you think failure is a D or an F, whatever you consider failure, which we all consider to be different, if you can take your failures and use them to become a better person and use them to learn, instead of feeling like I failed, so I'm a bad person, instead think
Yeah.
I failed, so now what can I do with this failure to learn more and to become a better person next time? Because the most successful people in life have failed. Huge.
Oh, totally. Like,
Huge failures, right? I mean, anyone that you can hear all the stories. You could just Google them. There's tons of stories about people, successful people who have completely failed. Maybe they started a business and it just bombed. They lost a ton of money, things like that, and then they learned from that and grew this huge, amazing business. Is just one, example. But if you can use your failures to help you to learn how to learn and learn how to be a better human being, then you'll get much farther in life than if you just get an A in every single class. We
Number
made it to 10. Okay, number 10 is that we truly want you to succeed. We really do. And like I said, I get no greater joy than when a student who's struggling comes to me and gets that help that they need. It makes me so incredibly happy. And it was so hard for me as a teacher. Like, it broke me, especially like my first year. It just broke me seeing my students fail when I knew that they could do better. Because honestly, when someone would get an F, now if I'm talking about failure as in an F, that's a failure can mean anything, but now we're talking about as an F. If a student gets an F in my class, it broke me because I knew that they could have gotten a D, a B, a C, an A. They just didn't do the work. Like, most of the time for the students that I saw, they just didn't do the work. And we as teachers, we want you to succeed. I would want nothing more to all my students to have an A, but I'm not going to give you an A if you didn't put in the effort, right?
Yeah.
If you just do nothing all semester, you don't show up for class, you don't turn in any assignments, you don't write a single thing on any of your tests or anything, I can't give you an A, but I want to more than anything.
Oh, that is... Aimee, you're like the best teacher out there. No, I think every teacher in the whole world would want to just shake you by your shoulders and tell you that they want you to succeed, and it's up to you though. Like, you can't force an A on any of your students.
No.
I
learned that the hard way. I wanted to. There were students that every day I'd beg them, come see me after school, and they wouldn't come.
So
and
hard.
if they had they would have definitely passed my class.
Oh, that's awesome. It's not awesome. They should have
Yeah.
come in and talked to you. Okay, well, there you have. Those are 10 things that your high school teacher wants you to know, and I'm so grateful that Aimee would come on here and talk to you like from a real high school teacher perspective, because every single one of these 10 tips can change your high school experience. And if there's anything that I want for you as your life coach, is for you to turn any like school experience into something positive. You don't have to love school. Like, I know that. I'm not trying to make you love school. I'm trying to help you turn school into a successful like springboard into who and what you want to become. So I hope you use these 10 tips. Remember them, write them down, put them in your school planner so that you can relate to your teachers and get the grades, get the success that you were after in high school. So, Aimee, thank you for coming on my channel. And we will see you in the next video. So, Abby J out.